D is used to represent the index. If it is 2D, then it's going to have 2 index. To identify any element which is present in the 2-dimensional array, I must know the row index as well as column index. Whatever the array size I'm going to specify, that must be constant value, or it can be an expression that evaluates an integer. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on arrays. I'm Revati, faculty, Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. In my last session of this chapter, I have discussed the following topic, that is one-dimensional array. That means how to create one-dimensional array. And what is array? So what is array? Arrays are nothing but the collection of homogeneous element grouped under same name, and it is called array. Then I have discussed the declaration of one-dimensional array. That means how can I declare one-dimensional array and what is the syntax I need to follow. So how can I declare one-dimensional array? That is, first I need to write the data type. Along with that, I need to mention the array name. Along with that, I need to specify the size. This is the way I can able to declare array. Then what is array initialization? I can able to initialize the array. How can I? So here directly I'm going to write the value. That means directly I'm going to assign the value, and this is the example for initialization of one-dimensional array. Then I have discussed how memory representation of one-dimensional arrays can be done. So here, if I consider this example, here integer holds 2 bytes. So what is the capacity of int? It is 2 bytes. And what is the size I'm going to have? It is 5. So here 2 into 5, total 10 bytes of memories are reserved for this array A. This is the way I can able to initialize, declare the arrays in my program. And from the examination point of view, these are the very important topic. Now in my today's session, I'm going to deal with two-dimensional array. That means how can I create two-dimensional array? How can I declare two-dimensional array? How can I initialize two-dimensional array, and how can I access the element which is present inside the two-dimensional array? Along with that, I'm going to deal with multi-dimensional array. So at the beginning, I'm going to deal with two-dimensional array. So what is two-dimensional array? It's also called 2D. Here D is nothing but the dimension. So here D is used to represent the index. If it is 2D, then it's going to have 2 index or 2 indices. It is an array in which each element is accessed using 2 subscript. So here 2D is an example for arrays, and if I want to access the element which is stored in the 2D array, then I require 2 subscript. So here subscript is nothing but the index. For example, think that I'm going to have the matrix representation. Dear student, just remember one thing, that the 2D is nothing but the matrix representation. The best example for 2D is That is nothing but the matrix representation. So here I'm having 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now tell me how many rows and how many columns I'm having here. That is 2 rows as well as 2 columns. And if I want to access the element 1, then how can I access? With the help of column index as well as row index. So here index starts from 0 and 1. If I consider column 0 and 1. Now if I want to access the element 1, how can I access? That is 0, 0. If I want to access 2, how can I access? With the help of 0 and 1. If I want to access 3, how can I? 1, 0. If I want to access 4, then how can I? That is 1 and 1. So here this row and column represents index. So this is the row index as well as column index, and this is represents index. So this kind of representation is called 2D or 2 dimension. That means if I want to access the value 1, then I require both the index. To access this one, I want 2 index, that is column index as well as row index. And to access the elements, I'm going to use 2-dimensional arrays as well as to store the values. Once again, I'm going to use 2-dimensional array. So here it is an array in which each element is accessed using 2 subscript. So here to access this element 4, I'm going to use 2 subscript. One is my row as well as column. The subscript represents the position of the element. So here the subscripts are mainly used to represent the position of the element. So if I consider the subscript 1, 1, that is nothing but the 4th position. Now the elements of 2-dimensional arrays are represented as rows and columns. So dear student, consider this example. If I want to declare 2D array, then A of row and A of column. This is the way I can able to declare 2-dimensional array. So what is this row? It is going to represent row. And what is this call? That is mainly used to represent column. So here I'm having column, I'm having row. And for each row, I'm going to have the index. So the index starts from 0 and it is m minus 1. And if I consider column, once again I'm going to have the index. So 0th index, 1st index, 2nd index until it is n minus 1. Now think that I'm having 1 and 2 here. Now if I want to access this 2, how can I access? See here, in 0th row and in the first column I'm having 2. So how can I access? When I'm having the index 0, 1, I can able to access the element 2. For example, think that here I'm having 5. Think that I want to access this element 5. How can I access? Once again with the help of row index as well as with the help of column index. So if I write that is 2, 2, then I can able to access the element 5. This is the way I can able to use 2-dimensional arrays. The elements of 2-dimensional arrays are represented as rows and columns. So here the elements of 2-dimensional arrays are represented by using rows and columns. To identify any element, we should know it is row number as well as column number. To identify any element which is present in the 2-dimensional array, I must know the row index as well as column index. Just remember one thing, that in two-dimensional arrays, the elements are represented by using rows and columns. And if I want to access that element, I must know the row value as well as column value. Now consider the simple example here. Here I am having array declaration, that is A. So what is A here? There is nothing but my array name. And what is this 2? This is nothing but the rows. And what is this 3? It is nothing but the column number. Now tell me how many elements I can able to store in 2 into 3 cross matrix, that is 6. So here if I write A of 2 and 3, then I can able to store 6 different element, and this kind of representations are called matrix representation. And the best example for two-dimensional arrays is matrix, that is two-dimensional matrix or three-dimensional matrix, etc. Now the declaration of two-dimensional array, that means how can I declare two-dimensional array? For that I need to follow the syntax. So at the beginning I'm going to have the data type, that is integer. Not only integer, I can able to consider any data type. Now I'm going to write the array name, it is A, and I'm going to specify this size. So here 2 represents number of rows. 2 represents number of rows, and here 3 represents number of columns. So here a two-dimensional arrays can be defined by specifying the data type. So at the beginning what I want to do, I want to specify the data type. For example, it is integer followed by the array name. So here A is nothing but the user defined array name. It's left to the user. User can define any array name. Followed by, I want to specify number of rows as well as number of columns. The row size and column size of the array must be constant and our expression. So here whatever the array size I'm going to specify, that must be constant value, or it can be an expression that evaluates an integer. So whatever the row size and column size I'm going to specify, that must be an integer value in terms of constant value or in terms of an expression. The row size and column size should be separately enclosed within square bracket. So here how I'm going to write? Separately I'm going to write. So I'm going to place row size as well as column size in the square bracket. Here I'm going to have the syntax, that is at the beginning I'm going to have the data type, then I'm going to specify the array name, then I'm going to specify the row size as well as column size. And for this is the example. That means first I'm going to write the data type. Here data type may be integer, float, character, etc. And I'm going to specify the array name. So it is user defined array name. Along with that, I'm going to specify row name as well as column name. And row name as well as column name must be integer value, or it is constant value, and it can be an expression. Moving further, I'm going to have simple example here. That is, how can I initialize two-dimensional array? It is similar to one-dimensional array. If I consider one-dimensional array, I'm going to have only one index. If I'm having two-dimensional array, I'm going to have two index, one for row and one for column. So this is the simple example I'm going to have. So here, what is my array name? It is A. And what is this 2? It's nothing but the number of rows. And what is this 3? That is represents number of columns I'm going to have in my program. And if I take A, here I'm going to have 2 rows. So this is my first row and this is my second row. So I'm going to have only 2 rows. And how many columns? 3 columns. So 1 column, 2 column and 3 column. Now see here, I'm going to have the value. That means I'm going to assign 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 to two-dimensional array A. So here I'm going to have 2 rows and 3 columns. So what I will do, I'm going to place first 3 numbers in my first row. So 1, 2, 3. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to write remaining 3 elements in my second row. That is 4, 5 and 6. Now I'm having 2 rows and 3 columns, and this kind of representations are called two-dimensional array. Now if I want to access this element 6, now I must know my row index as well as column index. With the help of row index as well as column index, I can able to access the element which is stored in the two-dimensional array. So here, see, it is 2 cross 3 matrix. So here it is 2 cross 3 matrix. That is 2 rows and 3 columns. It is 3 columns and 2 rows. That is 2 rows as well as 3 columns. Now see the index here, 0th index, first index, 0th index, first and second. This is always my column and this is always my row. Now I want to write the index. So here I'm having 0 and 0. I'll write 0 and 0. 0th row, first column, 0th row, first column. 0th row, second column. Now, first row, 0th column, first row, first column, first row, second column. So, this 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0, 1, 1 and 1, 2 are nothing but the index. Nothing but the index. Suppose think that I'm having the value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now think that I want to access the element 5. How can I access? With the help of index 1, 1. With the help of index 1, 1, I can able to access the value 5. So here, see, according to this example, this is the representation. In the place of 0, 0, I'm going to store 1. In place of 0, 1, I'm going to store 2. In place of 0, 2, I'm going to store 3. In place of 1, 0, I'm going to store 5. In place of 1, 1, I'm going to store 5. And in place of 1, 2, I'm going to store 6. And if the value are missing in an initialization, they are automatically set to 0. So here, if I consider this array, it is capable to hold 6 elements. By miss, if I enter or if I initialize only 5 elements, for the 6th element, by default, it's going to initialize the value 0. By default, it's going to take the value 0. And this is the representation. I'm going to have 2 rows and 3 columns. And this is nothing but the index. So here, array index starts from 0. So 0th index and first index. If I move column wise, then 0th column, first column and second column total I'm going to have 3 column. Moving further, I'm going to have how to accessing the element. Till now we discussed how to initialize the value. Now I'm going to discuss how can I access the value which is stored in the two-dimensional array. Consider the declaration, that is int array name A, it is 2 rows and 3 columns. So here we can able to store 6 element. If I write 2 into 3, it is 6 element. If I write A of 4, then it is 16 element. If I write A of 3, that is 3 cross 3, total I can able to store 9 element. So here I am going to have 2 index. One is row index and one is column index, and I am going to have number of elements. So here one loop is used to represent row value and another loop is used to represent column. In two-dimensional arrays, if I want to access the element or read the element, then I require 2 loops. One is outer loop and one is inner loop. And dear student, always remember that outer loop is always going to point row and inner loop is always going to point column. If outer loop is for rows and inner loop for columns, what I want to remember here? I want to remember always my outer loop is used to represent rows and always my inner loop is used to represent column. And for each row index, all the columns are processed and then same process is repeated for next row index. Now, for example, think that 0, 1, 0, 2. So here row remains as it is. That means my outer for loop remains as it is and inner for loop is going to increment each time. And when the inner for loop is get failed, then outer for loop is going to increment. This is the way I can able to accessing the elements which is present in the two-dimensional array. Now this is the simple code. So this code is used to illustrate how to read input from the keyboard. So this is the message to the user. So what the user want to do? User want to enter the element. For example, it is int A of 2 cross 3. Okay, now I want to read 6 different elements. For that reason, I'm going to use 2 for loop. And always remember that my outer for loop is always going to represent row and inner for loop is always going to represent column. Now, let me to draw this simple diagram here. It is 2 cross 3 matrix, that is 2 rows and 3 columns. Now, initially my first row is 0. So, my first row is 0. 0 less than 2, it is true. I am going to enter into the inner for loop. Now, J is nothing but column. Column is 0. 0 less than 3. Is it true or false? It is true. So what I want to do? I want to read the element and where I want to place, that is the index 0. I is 0 and J is 0. So I is 0, J is 0. Here I am going to place the value 20. Now J is incremented by 1. Now J is 1. That is first column. Now I'm going to check here, that is 1 less than 3. It is true. Now I'm going to store the value in the place of 0, 1. That is, I'm having 0th row and first column. Here I'm going to store 30. Now j is incremented by 1. Now j is 2. 2 less than 3. It is true. Now I'm going to consider this second column and 0th row. So here in the place of 0th row and second column, I'm going to store 10. Now j is incremented by 1. J is 3. 3 less than 3, the condition false. So I'm going to move to the outer loop. Now outer loop, I is incremented by 1. Now I is 1. 1 less than 2. It is true. So what is this one? That is nothing but my first row. So it is my first row. Now once again, I'm going to enter into the inner for loop, that is j. J is 0. 0 less than 3. Condition is true. Now a of I is 1. What is j? It is 0. So in the place of 1, 0, that is row 1 and column 0, I'm going to store 40. Now j is incremented by 1. Now j is 1. 1 less than 3, it is true. Now in the place of 1, 1, that is first row and first column, I'm going to store 50. Now j is incremented by 1. Now j is 2. 2. Now 2 less than 3, it is true. First row and third column, I'm going to store 60. Now j is incremented by 1. J is 3. 3 less than 3, the condition false. Now the control transferred to outer for loop. Now I is incremented by 1. Now I is 2. 2 less than 2, the condition false. So the control comes out from this statement. This is the way I can able to access the element which is in the two-dimensional array. Moving further, I'm going to have this simple program, that is how to read the values from the keyboard and how can I store that in my memory and how can I print that elements which is stored in my two-dimensional array. Now this is the simple program, and from the examination point of view, this is very important program. At the beginning, I'm going to include two header files, that is iostream.h and conio.h, and the actual execution of the program is going to start from main program, and this is the example for two-dimensional array. So here int a of 5 and 5. So here I'm going to have 5 rows and 5 columns. Instead of taking 5 rows and 5 columns, what I will do, I'm going to take 2 rows and 2 columns. I'll take 2 rows and 2 columns. So this is the 2 into 2, that is 2 cross 2 matrix representation. And here I'm having index I and index j. So I is for my row and j is for my column. So here m is nothing but the row size, whereas n is nothing but the column size. Now for our reference, I'll write the index. It is 0 and this is 1. Now I'm going to display the message to the user that enter the element. Now I know the row index, column index, as well as row size, as well as column size. But manually, I want to specify the row size as well as column size. So what I will do, I'm going to display the message to the user that enter the row limit as well as column limit. So what is row limit? That is nothing but the size. So here user is going to enter row limit as well as column size. For example, say row is 2 and column is 2. Now, I'm going to display the message to the user indicating that enter the element one by one. So, it is 2 cross 2 matrix. So, it's going to read and store 4 elements. Now, I want to use the for loop because I'm going to read 4 different values and I'm going to store all these values under different rows and different columns. So here the first for loop is for my row and second for loop is for my column, and the index always going to start from 0. So 0 less than 2, it is true. Now I'm going to enter into the inner for loop. What is J? J is 0. 0 less than 2, it is true. So what I want to do? I want to read the value and I want to store that value in the place of 0 and 0. For example, it is 5. Now, inner for loop is going to increment by 1, that is J equal to 1. Now, 1 less than or equal to 2, it is true. So, I am going to place in place of 0th row and first column, I'll place 10. Now, once again, the inner for loop J is going to increment by 1. Now, J is 2. 2 less than 2, the condition is false. So, the control transferred to outer for loop. Now, in outer for loop, I is going to increment by 1. Now, 1 less than 2, it is true. So, the control transferred to inner for loop, what is the I value? I value is 1. Then what about J? J is 0. 0 less than 2. The condition is true. So, I am going to store the value in the place of first row and 0th column. For example, it is 12. Now, J is incremented by 1. Now, J is 1. 1 less than 2. The condition is true. Now, in place of 1, that is first row and first column, I am going to store the value 3. Now, J is incremented by 1. J is 2. 2 less than 2. The condition false. Now, the control transferred to outer for loop, that is 2 less than 2, the condition is false. So, the control directly transferred into the next statement, that is, I want to display the element which is stored in my array. How can I display? Once again, I require 2 loops, one for row and one for column, because to display these values I required both the index. So for that I am going to use 2 for loop in my program. Now I want to print the value 5 and where it is stored in the place of 0, 0, that is 0th column and 0th row. So here for that reason I am going to start my for loop with the value 0, 0 less than 2, true. Now what is J? J is 0, 0 less than 2, condition is true. I am going to read the value which is stored in this location, that is 0, 0. I want to read this value 5. And when I write this statement, I'm going to get the value 5. Now, j is incremented by 1. J is 1. 1 less than 2. The condition is true. Now, in the place of 0th row, first column, I'm having 10. Now, I want to display 10. Now, j is incremented by 1. Now, j is 2. 2 less than 2. The condition is false. So, outer loop is going to execute. Now, the control transferred to outer loop. Now, I is going to increment by 1. Now, I is 1. 1 less than 2, it is true. So, I'm going to have first row. Now, I want to consider 0th column. For that reason, j equal to 0. And 0 less than 2, it is true. So, I'm going to read the content which is stored in this location. That is, first row and 0th column, I'm having 12. Now, j is incremented by 1. Now, j is 1. 1 less than 2. The condition is true. So, I'm going to read the value which is present at the location 1, 1. That is, first row and first column. I'm having 3 and I'm going to display 3. Now, j is incremented by 1. Now, j is 2. 2 less than 2. The condition is false. So, the control transferred to outer for loop. Now, I is incremented by 1, that is 2 less than 2. The condition is false. So, the control directly transferred into get ch statement. This is the way I can able to read the element and I can able to display the element which is present in the two-dimensional array. Now, at the end, I'm going to have multi-dimensional array. So, what is multi-dimensional array? There is nothing but in my array, I'm going to have n dimension. So, what is D here? That is nothing but the index. So, here, what is multi-dimensional array? I'm having n number of index. So, a multi-dimensional array is an array of n dimensions, an array of array. So, when I'm having one array, in that I'm having another array. It's also called multi-dimensional array. And syntax here is, first I'm going to have the data type and I'm going to have the array name and I'm going to have n number of dimension. So, here this is the syntax for the multi-dimensional array. And the best example here is int a of 3, a of 4, a of 5, a of 6. This is the example for multi-dimensional array. So, here I am going to have n number of dimension. So, how many n number of dimension I am having? 4. So, here I am having 4 different index and this kind of array representations are called multi-dimensional array. So, what is multi-dimensional array? It is nothing but the array inside array, or multi-dimensional array is an array of n dimension. And if I consider this example, how many dimension I'm having? 4 dimension. So, it is 4D. Now, where S1 is the size of ith dimension. See here, if I consider this example, S1 is nothing but the ith dimension. So, here S1 is mainly used to indicate the ith dimension of the array. So, this is the way I can able to declare multi-dimensional arrays in my program. I hope, dear student, in my today's session you got more information about two-dimensional array. That is, how to initialize the array, how to declare the array, how to access the array. So, accessing array is nothing but the printing array. So, dear student, from the examination point of view, this is also very important topic. I hope in my today's session you got more information about arrays. So, dear student, let's meet in the next session with some more information about functions. Until then, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.